7 reasons why feminists lie so much. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I have been meaning to make a video about why exactly it seems that amongst the ranks of people that self-identify as feminists, so many of them are serial liars. Anita Sarkeesian, Stephanie Guthrie, and Emma Solkowitz, aka Mattress Girl, are all great examples of well-publicized feminists that have been caught red-handed lying endlessly in recent years. But people should realize that these aren't just a few bad apples, and that it's actually the nature of the ideology and the social structures that surround this ideology that bring this out in people. I thought initially that I could come up with a concise essay video for this, but I realized that there were many factors, so a listicle format would work best. Quick disclaimer, when I speak of feminists who lie constantly, I am referring generally to the hardcore true believer feminists and also the opportunistic professional feminists. However, it should be of note that any person, especially a female-identified person, is more and more likely to start lying after they spend time around feminists, read feminist blogs, feminist theory texts, take gender studies classes, and or watch videos from feminists like Kat Black. So, reason number 1 why feminists lie a lot is probably what tends to be the most common thing that inspires most young women and some men to tell a few fibs initially, and that would obviously be peer pressure. Even if you don't actually really spend any time reading feminist blogs or whatever, the average individual in even semi-left-leaning America today has undoubtedly noticed that it is treated as virtuous to be a victim, where if you share a story about having been abused in any way, you'll be treated like you are brave and patted on the back for it. This was easily observable with the hashtag #MeToo from a week or two ago, which I made an entire video about. But this victimhood culture has been going on for numerous years, and it's really a messed up state of affairs. If you point out that glorifying victimhood on a cultural level leads to endless whining, an inability for abused individuals to properly put stuff behind them and move on with their lives, and eventual actual lying from numerous people who are simply claiming to have been raped and beaten because it is trendy, if you point all that out, many people will say that you are silencing survivors, completely missing the point deliberately. Ultimately, in cultural climates where abnormal things become completely normalized, like massive amounts of people publicly sharing their abuse stories and other such traumatic events on the internet, we have to ask ourselves why people don't normally do this. While answering that question could be an entire video by itself, I think I can give a simple enough answer for the context of this video. We don't normally share our stories of abuse because we aren't actually proud of these things, and we don't want to give the impression that we are bragging because it might inspire people to wish it happened to them, or to lie about it and say that it did, even if it didn't. Reason number 2 that feminists often lie goes right after the first one for a reason, which is that the nature of feminist socialization itself offers protection from being exposed as a liar. Once a feminist starts hanging out with other feminists who don't really see her as a true feminist unless she at least implies that she deeply hates men, something that she can generally only really prove by offering a story of abuse at the hands of a man, then she'll likely fabricate or exaggerate a story about male abuse, if she didn't already have one. Almost every feminist will deny that this happens until they are dead in the grave, of course, the same way that a large percentage of them will deny that they hate men. And of course, both things would be lies. And it's not even all that hard to get capital F feminists to admit that they hate men if you know how to approach the conversation. That said, there really is a huge percentage of feminists that know perfectly well that they've exaggerated or flat out fabricated stories about male abusers, and they have thus gone on to corroborate their stories as individuals with each other, like in the case of Jian Goneshi, where numerous women conspired to make false allegations of sexual misconduct. And then, after a while, I personally suspect that this happened so much that feminists, as a greater, loosely strung together organization in the West, eventually went on to coordinate a massive cultural narrative that women who claim to have been harassed or abused basically never lie. I'm sure you've heard this before, but if you don't believe me, do a Google search for "How often do women lie about rape?" and see how many articles come up that say it's only between 2 to 8% of allegations that are false, and that most rapes aren't reported anyways, which turns out basically couldn't be further than the truth. So, if you take into account the fact that feminism is offering both a motive and then an alibi to exonerate oneself with after the person has lied about sexual misconduct or other abuse, then it's completely hard not to see why there's so many young women totally making shit up in the current year. They know that their feminist friends will cover for them, and they know that culture will cover for them. The third reason feminist true believers lie constantly is simply because the entire root premise of the philosophy already makes no sense. No, we do not live in a society where all men oppress all women and girls to benefit all males, either consciously or subconsciously, because almost every man alive does everything he can for the majority of his life to make women happy ahead of his fellow men. In order to not see that most men do everything they can to please women so that they can find a wife or girlfriend, or simply to please their mothers, and to avoid honestly looking at male sacrifice in dangerous occupational positions like firefighting, electrical work, and sewer maintenance, feminists have to start either seeing a reality that doesn't honestly exist, or to simply start lying about what they see. That's why these women invented phrases like mansplaining and manspreading, which honestly, I don't even think most feminists actually even use correctly as terms, legitimately pointing out times in which men are sincerely being rude. Rather, in order to see a lot of misogyny in the contemporary American West, you simply have to make shit up. I would be willing to bet that a huge percentage of feminists that post status updates on Facebook about horrible manspreaders that they encountered on public transportation are either exaggerating the story or just making it up. And if they are telling the truth and there really was a guy that was quote unquote manspreading, they have to know deep down that he's probably a tall guy and that it's most comfortable to sit like that and he's not trying to oppress them. They probably know that, but they're lying about it because they want to believe that they're being oppressed. More so, I almost never witness feminists that use the term mansplaining in a way that suits the dictionary definition, which is supposed to imply that a man is explaining something to a woman that she obviously already knows, and he's explaining it in a condescending way simply because she is a woman and he assumes that he knows more stuff than she does. Sure, I bet this happens occasionally, but usually when I see people being accused of mansplaining, Often it's me, it's on the internet, and it happens after I explain something to a woman that she really obviously doesn't know anything about, very often about feminism, and she says, I'm mansplaining feminism to her. And my response tends to be, it's not mansplaining, because you actually really do know almost nothing about feminism. And truthfully, deep down, I'm sure she kind of knows that she doesn't really know anything about feminist theory, history, or contemporary feminist organizing. But she doesn't mind lying to pretend that I am being an oppressive patriarch by pointing that out, because feminism has made that permissible in her mind. The fourth reason that feminists lie so much is that feminism attracts women with personality problems. For the reasons I have already explained, it is pretty evident why women that already have major personality problems would be attracted to this type of crowd. Why wouldn't somebody with a cluster B personality disorder like borderline, narcissistic, or histrionic be attracted to communities of women who pat them on the back for having dramatic meltdowns about how hard their lives are as women? If somebody already has a tendency to be incredibly melodramatic and dishonest, why wouldn't they gravitate towards a social environment that rewards them for this behavior? And of course, once there, they peer pressure each other, and it kicks in and it gets worse and worse. Crazy women peer pressure semi-crazy women into getting crazier. The fifth reason that high-ranking feminists especially seemingly all have told some very serious lies obviously has to be because feminism is parasitic in nature and can only exist with the help of the productive and mostly male half of the population. You see, feminism as a loosely strung together organization and industry, which it definitely is, can only exist with the generous donations of people that actually contribute to the economy, as feminists are never going to actually do anything particularly productive. I challenge you to name one thing that feminists really do that isn't based primarily around ordering other people around or shaming them for stepping out of line. One thing that isn't founded upon some element of false pretenses, aka lying. If you're a feminist, you're charitably probably thinking to yourself that feminists organize domestic abuse services and shelters and organizations for rape survivors. But of course, those are almost always built around blatant lies, like that only men are violent, and that men should be denied these services for reasons that do not stand up to any intellectual scrutiny. Still, as Erin Pitsey points out, founder of the world's first domestic violence shelter in 1971, which was subject to a hostile takeover by feminists, there is very little money in helping men or helping women in a way that admits that they aren't all the innocent victims of male abuse. If you claim to be helping innocent women who have been abused, there's countless people willing to throw money at you. And so, even if you don't have an endless pile of innocent women that need a bunch of help, which very often there aren't a bunch of because people don't endlessly abuse innocent women, or if you do have a whole bunch of violent women and or homeless men that you could be helping instead, well, you might as well just lie and say that you are helping female victims exclusively for the money. Innocent female victims, so you get more money. Reason number 6 that feminists lie all the time is because feminism is the dominant cultural narrative in the entire Western world, and yet it claims to be sticking up for the disadvantaged. So, in order for that to work out, you have to lie a lot. I'll spare you too many details because you can probably imagine them for yourself, but it's a really sad state of affairs that universities in the West are around 60% female in enrollment on average, and that young men on campuses don't even get trials if they are accused of misconduct with a female. Yet still, there are teachers going on and on about how females are the ones being quote unquote oppressed. How does this make any sense? It doesn't. But you can always lie and say that it does. And plenty of people have entire careers that revolve around that very lie. The seventh reason that feminists lie so much is because feminist theory actually trains women to believe that they might have been raped after awkward hookups or abused by their boyfriends, even if they were the one that was physically abusive or sexually aggressive. This is particularly similar to the peer pressure one, but I figured I'd make it separate because all a young woman has to do is read a certain feminist text about how basically every interaction between a male and female was based around the man dominating the woman, and they could start finding ways of lying to themselves about what happened, and thus they might end up lying to other people. Can you think of any more reasons that feminists lie so much? Leave it in the comments and stay tuned.